I mean, you guys told me we don't swear in this podcast. Well, you know what? Good luck fishing a frog then, because you're going to probably swear at some point.
Welcome, everyone, to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Although, I'm sure we have to rename this episode, right, Jesse? Because we have as a guest today someone who is, I think the last word you describe is average. He's not only good looking, but he's a hammer on the water. We've probably all seen him on TV, which at that point, you're no longer average. We have Dave Mercer as a guest. We're really happy to have you on, and we will be getting to the main topic of flipping, frogging, pitching, all the stuff we're excited for bass season coming up, right?
Oh yeah, that's postcard bass fishing. That's and it's weird, because I spend so much time working in the US. I think in some ways, as much as I find our seasons frustrating, because it's so weird that in March to go somewhere and be like, wow, it's summer here. And then you come home and everything's still frozen. And it is weird once our lake's open to, just because, I remember I told a buddy in Texas once that he was getting married. Kelly Jordan, he's an Elite Series pro, former Elite Series pro. He was getting married, and he was getting married in Bass Opener. And I was like, dude, you're getting married in Bass Opener. He's like, man, why do you have a Bass Closer? It seems so weird to him. But I do think there's a weird little part of us that we get to experience something that they don't. And what I mean by that is we get to experience that same feeling that I don't hunt, but I got a lot of buddies who, get nuts for whitetail season and that excitement leading. But I think that hunters are so ravenous and so obsessed with it because it's just a limited thing. And in our world, so is bass fishing. So it's a good time of year. Everybody's excited to finally bass fish.
I agree. I think Jesse is too, despite his silence.
I totally am.
So we're going to be getting to some more stuff with Dave in just a minute. But to start us off, we have an interesting fishing fact that Jesse has prepared for us. We're going to start off with that, and then we'll get into all the juice that people want to hear about flipping, pitching, frogging, all the fun stuff that we're looking forward to in a couple weeks' time from this when this is released.
Yeah. So I thought we could talk about something that we're not excited for, because now that it's June, the mosquitoes are terrible. And remember last season we did Mosquito Facts Part 1? I thought we would do Mosquito Facts Part 2, because mosquitoes are the worst thing ever invented. But I thought we could talk a little bit about bug spray. Now, something that probably we use a lot of, every single one of us, we use bug spray when we go out. It's almost an essential item, especially when you're doing backcountry camping and stuff like what me and Andrew do. But have you ever wondered how bug spray works? Now, I know Andrew does because he's a smart cookie, but if you haven't, this is how it works. Now, do you know what DEET is?
I know it's a chemical. I kind of know what it does, but I couldn't really describe the actual chemical composition of it to you.
Yeah. I tried to figure out how to pronounce this. It's impossible. It's like DEET. It's N-diethylmetatulamide something. We just call it DEET because it's easier. It's DEET. It was actually developed by the U.S. Army in 1946 for military personnel operating in insect-heavy environments. And then it became available to the public about 10 years later in 1957. It's the most widely used and tested insect repellents in the world. And the reason for that is because it actually works. I'm sure we've heard of all these natural things like, oh, do this and do that. It doesn't work as good. DEET is literally the best thing ever. It's a synthetic chemical. It can be applied obviously directly to our skin, which is good. And it's available in various concentrations ranging from 5 to 100%. Now, I know me and Andrew are always whenever we go to the States, we're like, oh, we got to find that. What is it, the high concentrate?
The 99% DEET, because here in Canada, you can only get 30%, right?
Yeah.
Max.
But I'm going to tell you why you don't have to get the 100%. It doesn't actually matter. So the higher the percentage, the longer it lasts.
Dave's questioning your logic here, Jesse.
Yeah, well, this is science. The higher the percentage, the longer it lasts, but the effectiveness plateaus at 50%. So if you have lower concentrations of DEET, you can just use more of it and you're good. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so how does DEET actually work? Now, the interesting thing is a lot of people think that DEET actually kills insects. It doesn't actually kill them. It repels them, of course. That's why all the bug sprays are called repel, stuff like that. Remember all those old fishing show commercials with the guys with the muskol? Remember those? Yeah. So one of the reasons that it works is it disrupts the insect's senses, which is pretty cool. Insects like mosquitoes and ticks, they rely heavily on smell receptors that they have to help find their prey, which could be humans, unfortunately for us, but also other animals. And they're drawn to the carbon dioxide when we exhale. We mentioned this last year about how they find you to suck your blood. DEET actually blocks the insect's ability to detect these cues. So it confuses their antennae and sensory neutrons, making it difficult for them to recognize humans as a target. So that's pretty cool. Like, that's just bug spray, something we use all the time, but it's actually like this weird, crazy like shield that we put on that makes insects very confused, that's pretty cool. It also overloads their nervous system. And research has shown that DEET interferes with mosquitoes' receptors that detect human scent. And it basically, long story short, it jams their radar, so to say. So that's pretty cool. Now, DEET actually, when we put it on our skin, oftentimes we have the aerosol or the spray bottle. It actually forms, or it evaporates on our skin and forms an invisible chemical shield that makes it harder for mosquitoes to locate us. That's why oftentimes, like, you'll have like swarms of mosquitoes around you and you'll put on bug spray and they'll still be around you, but they won't actually come on you. So it doesn't like repel them away from you. They just won't actually be able to land on you because it confuses them. I thought that was pretty cool. We all know DEET, not just for mosquitoes, but it also works for ticks, fleas, other biting flies. It's pretty good. One thing I just mentioned about safety, because there's a funny story about this. I'm sure we all somehow sadly know what bug spray tastes like. I'm sure we've got it on our hand or something, and we licked our hand, or like had some sauce from our sandwich and we lick it. It's disgusting. Don't do that. It's not good to eat. It's not good for you. But make sure that when you apply bug spray, that you don't apply any on your forehead if you sweat a lot, because it will drip into your eye. That's not good. You don't want to put it anywhere near your eyeballs. That's bad. Or any other openings on your body. So that's what you should do. Now, the funny thing is, this article I'm looking at, it said there was alternatives to using DEET. Now, I've tried some of these, and I would say in my experience, they're all garbage. Like, they absolutely don't work. They might work slightly. It goes through a whole bunch of these. Like, one of them is like oil of lemon eucalyptus. It's natural. It doesn't work. It has like a low to moderate protection. So like, DEET is the best, I have to say. Anyway, I thought just because it's summertime, make sure that you have your bug spray, because there's nothing more annoying. Me and Andrew know this because we go a lot backcountry, as you guys know, and the bugs are terrible this time of year. So make sure you have your DEET, that simple thing that we all have, but it actually is a complex chemical that protects us from going completely insane. So that's the interesting fishing fact of today.
That's the details.
Oh,
that's a good one.
Not very good at all.
You can tell this guy has a podcast.
I was going to say something to the effect like, I guess Jesse's wearing the podcast version because we just repelled a bunch of listeners with that boring fact. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I was enthralled.
Good.
It's like an audio version of Google. It was really, really good. I loved every minute of it. I disagree with you, though. I'm going to jam as much DEET into my body as possible.
Especially around the openings.
Well, you got to avoid the openings if you weren't listening.
Especially in the openings.
Hey, you also can't, I know this from childhood experience, if you spray it in a tent, because when I was in like Cub Scouts, when I was a kid, we went to the big camp off and we were in a tent and we thought it was like a big good idea at the time to spray different things. Like we thought, I think we sprayed AC/DC or something like that on the actual tent. Now, technology's probably changed in time, but at that time, it meant that your tent rained right through where you sprayed it. So do not do that. I would not recommend that. AC/DC did look cool on our tent, though.
That's a great tip.
Not really.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing many more awesome tips like that in this episode.
Probably
lessons
not.
Learned.
Thank you.
So our guest today, as we already mentioned, Dave Mercer. You'd probably recognize him from his TV show, Facts of Fishing. He's also got a podcast that's very well on. He's also, if you follow the professional series at all for fishing, he's pretty much on screen more than anyone else in that series because he's the MC. Right? He's doing all the talking. You're at the weigh-ins. Now, we obviously are recording this in advance like normal, but what's new with you, Dave? I know you've been kind of all over recently. There's some tournaments happening right now. So what have you been up to recently?
Just tournaments. I mean, literally, it's great. Trust me, I like to get out of the snow. when it's cold. So it starts off, February, but basically February to right now, it's pretty busy, covering events and traveling all over wherever the Bassmaster Elite Series brings me. But now it's kind of the good time, if you ask me. It starts to slow down a little bit. We only have a few more events left. I can actually get back to my real job, which is shooting TV shows and actually spend time on the water rather than just talking about fishing. So yeah, I've been talking about fishing a lot. I'm ready to just start doing it more. I've been shooting a lot of underwater stuff, which I'm obsessed with. The springtime is one of the best times to do that. Spring and fall, like when the water gets cool, that's when you want to shoot a lot of that. So I've been busy doing a lot of that and ready to start shooting some shows.
That's awesome. So between now and this will probably be released in June sometime, early June, before bass season starts. We're getting all pumped for that, ready to go as the weeds are emerging at that point in time. Do you have any big plans between now and date of release?
I got to be honest, guys. I gotta let the facade down. We're recording this in March. It is freaking, a sled just flipped right past my house. I'm sorry to break the magic here, but so it's so confusing. I assume I've been doing some underwater footage.
That's fantastic.
Sorry to destroy everything. I tried to keep the charade up, guys. Did I ruin it all?
No. I called it right out to the open. You did awesome.
I told Dave 18 times before recording that it was June and not March, but it's okay.
It probably is when you guys are listening to this. And nothing's different between March and June. Nothing changes. It's about the same as always. But no, I will assume that, we shot some cool shows this spring on Erie, because we do plan on doing that. I'll also assume that we've been to Beauchesne, which is somewhere that I go literally. You guys said you grew up on the show, so you've seen a lot of Beauchesne. And every single year we go there, and I'm like, you know what? Next year we're not going to go there. And then we cut together the shows from there, and we're like, yeah, how can we never, ever not go there? Because it's so perfect. And you can catch bigger bass. On Erie, you can catch, but it's just so. It's how rare, being away from people is, nowadays, and you actually can just go places, and it's just a special place. It's just a magical place that I get to go to. So yeah, I'll assume we've shot some shows there, and we got a new Bassmaster Classic champion, and he's great.
Whoever he was.
Yeah, I loved that tournament. It was a lot of fun. And all the others. What a season of tournaments.
Awesome. I loved, my favorite part was, your closing line when you finish all your emceeing at that last event. That was just a great joke you had at the very end. That was fantastic.
People loved it. They really did. They really did. Hey, what if in between now and then I become I don't want to, what if there's a big controversy? If I get, will you still air this?
We just don't release it. That's all. Fine.
Oh,
definitely would release it. It would get great views.
Yeah. Told you guys you're gonna learn nothing.
We're just gonna re-edit it into a true crime podcast and just release it that way. No worries.
Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question, but I definitely moved the hole that makes the words a bunch.
You absolutely got that right. That was perfect. I am very excited for the rest of this episode.
I'm excited and confused, but that's fine.
Totally.
We're going to move on to our main topic. We're going to start with flitching and
flitching.
It's a new
that's
technique.
Another thing.
Flipping and pitching. So when and why do we use each technique? And we've talked a bit before on the podcast previously. There is a difference between flipping and pitching. You want to maybe define that for us quickly, Jesse?
Yeah. So I think when people, when they're pitching, which is probably the most common way to fish, generally, people always say that they're, flipping a jig in here, flipping a jig in there, but they're not literally flipping. It's maybe the action of flipping out a bait, but flipping is actually pulling line off your reel and super covertly dropping it into holes pretty close to the boat. And pitching is when you do a quick underhand cast, which gives you a lot more range, fairly accurate too, not as stealthy. So that's the difference. But they're pretty much used interchangeably now, I guess you could say. And I'm not going to be one of those guys that gets mad and say, know the difference. Doesn't matter. It's fishing.
Do people get mad?
Oh, yeah.
Like how mad? Like pineapple on pizza mad or?
Oh, pretty close. Almost walleye and pickerel mad.
Oh, that's... I mean, to a lot of the world, nobody cares. But to that one dude, how freaking dare you even think that is a walleye or a pickerel? Yeah. So, hey, the old thing about flipping and pitching too is that was an evolution. Flipping, when it first came in, as weird as it is, because you see a lot of this around like forward-facing sonar and things like that, where people are like, oh, that should be illegal in tournaments. And, that's another thing, like pineapples on pizza. There's people on both sides of that, obviously. But flipping at one time, D. Thomas was kind of the dude, one of the main people who invented it. And at one time, they wanted to make it illegal because you were accessing these bass that had never, ever seen a bait before. And that's your traditional underhand flipping. And then it did evolve in time to pitching because pitching just wasn't as accurate initially. And now our equipment's better. But yeah, that was a whole evolution. There was one time there was flipping and there was no pitching. And then somebody said, hey, let me take this underhand roll cast and we'll just call it pitching. But D. Thomas and several others, Ken Glebe, they were West Coast pros who introduced it to the East Coast, and they won a bunch of tournaments initially. They tried to outlaw their rods because they were using longer rods than anybody, and that's why there's an actual length of rod rule in bass tournaments because of that. There's a little fact for you.
People always get mad when someone invents a better way to catch fish.
They do.
That's a good fact of fishing. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He said the thing.
I dislike that name. Just picked it because it rhymed, really. But here's what I do know in life. No matter what if you're lucky enough to end up with a fishing show, which it has all been 100% luck, trust me, you're going to hate the name, whatever you call it. You know what I mean? Like just Facts of Fishing. I mean, at the time I was like, this is great. It's Facts of Fishing. And there's some of our shows where you don't learn a fact at all. But here's the cool thing about that name. And I didn't know this when I first named it. Growing up, I loved Bob Azumi, obviously. Everybody loves Bob Azumi. Mm-hmm. I was a huge Al Linder fan, a huge In Fisherman fan. I mean, I think all of us can agree. You know what I mean? Those were kind of the northern guys that spoke for us. And the crazy thing is the original name of In Fisherman, and I did not know this when I called the show that, is Facts of Fishing. And they actually, there's pictures, if you search it up, there's pictures around where you can see the Linders holding walleye most likely off the side of their boat, and it says Facts of Fishing on it. And me and Al have talked about it a few times, and he promises that he's going to sign me one of those and send it to me so I can hang it in my office. And hey, it's June now. Maybe I've got it by now. Let's just assume. Hey, Al, thanks for the picture. Really nice. Love it. Sets the office off perfectly.
I'm having too much fun on this one.
This is going to be hard to keep to an hour.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll stop talking. I'll go back to that awkward section when you were given the facts and I was just staring at the camera wondering what I was supposed to do.
No, people aren't coming here to listen to me.
Oh, yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Oh.
So with flipping and pitching, I'll bring us back to main topic.
Thank you.
What are some common mistakes that you see? I mean, we've all seen some shenanigans, especially on boat launches and whatnot, but what are some mistakes people make when they're trying to, flip or pitch that are easily, fixable? Honestly,
the biggest mistake that I see people making is they don't use heavy enough a weight. They have stuck in that whole like, oh, you got to let your bait fall slowly. And that is true in certain situations. But with flipping and pitching, you want your bait to get through. I mean, especially when you're fishing a lot of the lakes that we fish, a lot of the Kawarthas and stuff like that, where you get that thick mat. And, this time of year, June, it's just starting. But in a few months from now, it'll be so much thicker. But you see a lot of people and they get that bait and it kind of goes through the first level, but it's hung up. You want that bait to get right through. So whether it's pads you're fishing, whether it's slop you're fishing, use a heavier weight. That to me is the simple thing that you see a lot of people where they think their bait is through, but it's not. And it's the same thing with throwing jigs. I mean, the weight of your bait is probably one of the most underspoken of, but highest. It gets you bites. You know what I mean? Whether and it's the same thing. You want your bait to get down. You want your bait, you go out to the Great Lakes, exact opposite flipping and pitching. But if you're fishing in 30 feet of water and your bait's not quite down on the bottom, the first 28 feet of that water don't really matter in most situations. Most of the fish are in the bottom too. So you got to get a weight that gets your bait down, whether you're in deep water or whether you're flipping and pitching. But I do think a lot of times you go to Skugog, you go to rice, where you got a lot of, that canopied weed. Your bait gets hung up on that weed, doesn't get all the way through. And that's the mistake that I see happening most.
I make that one a lot. I'll be honest.
Well, we're going to help you, Andrew.
Perfect. This is what Jesse said. Andrew, you host it. Then, you can actually learn something because you're forced to pay attention.
I was just going to say, though, like for flipping like weights, like I've worked at a few tackle shops and like, yeah, I find they'd buy weights not heavy enough. They'd be like, oh, 1/2 ounce tungsten, that's enough. It's like, sometimes you got to be thinking like 3/4 to start.
Yeah.
And then 1 ounce, maybe more than that. Because if you're flipping through slop and your bait's only going down for every 10 casts, only getting through 1 or 2 times, you're not being effective. You're not being efficient. Flipping and pitching is about, hitting as much spots as you can, going through, pop it through, jiggle, jiggle, pull it out, go in again. And if your bait's getting stuck up half the time, you're wasting your time. So yeah, the reaction bite too, when it shoots down, can be huge.
Huge.
And
yeah.
You have to
Don't worry about using it too big. It's not legit Florida 2 ounce tungstens though, generally. There's no hyacinth mats up here.
But I forgot to address at kind of the head of the podcast is, this is all about fishing, like heavy weed cover. Now, again, we're not talking those giant mats down in Florida, those floating mats that take up a whole pond size. But yeah, we have a lot of green weeds here that grow in a lot of lakes. It may be one bay that's in a lake. It could be the whole lake, depending on which one you're at. Like you mentioned, Skugog, very local to us, very local to Dave. But it's like that lake is just known as it's weedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of this stuff is focused on that. But what are some key areas that you target? If we are going to, let's say we want to learn the technique of flipping and pitching, what areas are you targeting?
The principles of fishing don't change no matter what the cover or structure you're fishing is. I mean, it is literally the exact same. If you could understand what you would fish on a boat dock, you can insert that on a pad bed. You can insert that on a MILF line, whatever you want to refer to. You want edges, you want pockets, you want little areas of difference. And that's what makes Skugog and rice and some of these super weedy lakes tough to fish, because guess what? A bass can be literally anywhere. And that is more true than we care to admit. Like there's bass everywhere. And I just think that's what makes them difficult, because you're trying to just hit as many of those little holes and pockets as you can. But what I try to do is I try to focus one cast at a time. So when I'm fishing, like I literally am scanning always, and right in front of me, whether it's slop, whether it's a dock, whatever you're fishing, you want that edge, you want that corner, you want that pocket. So the targets don't change, whether it's rocks you're fishing, whether it's weeds you're fishing, whether it's boat docks you're fishing. I mean, you want edges, you want differences. And also the other thing that can help is a lot of times those slop beds that you catch them in, there's a depression under there. Somebody gets their boat stuck and they're trying to, that's building those depressions, and those fish relate to those depressions. So anything different really is my target zone.
So yeah, just hit as many targets as you can. Look for small targets even, and just hit as fast as possible, basically.
Yeah, and respond to what you get success from. Like if you get one, if all of a sudden you get them on straight holes that are open, start hitting more of those holes that are open and you'll catch more fish. I mean, generally, but don't get stuck to that. The next time you go fishing, don't be thinking, oh, well, I got to hit only holes, because that time they might be on the little outside points. Once you figure out where those fish are holding, duplicate it and you'll catch more.
And what about speed? How fast are you fishing these holes? Let's say you have a bunch of good holes. Are you just going through hitting as many as you can? Or if you see a nice spot, are you going to fish it for a few minutes?
That's kind of situations are situational. Like that's a hard question to answer. I wish I knew the answer like yours should expect. And that's what happens in people's minds. In fishing, they try to make educated guesses science. They try to turn it into, when you throw your jig in, you should pop it 3 times before you decide to reel it up and go somewhere else. There's times where I'll soak it. And I know and a lot of times you get onto that by mistake where you're fishing faster and then something happens. You got to turn around and you leave your bait in there a little longer and you feel that, then okay, I got to slow down a little bit. which is hard for me to pay attention to those little things because I'm an idiot. You guys can't even keep the wheels on while we're trying to do a podcast. I couldn't even keep the Sherrod up for the first 10 minutes. So I always think like the fact that I've been able to make a living from fishing is funny because if you look at so many of the great Elite Series pros, they're just very methodical and they just like they're very even keeled, not spazzes like me at all. With the exception of probably Mike Iaconelli. He's the only one where I would say is kind of a spaz on the water. The rest of them are very, but you want to absorb like every single cast you make, you should be learning more. So even on days when you don't catch them real well, you've learned a lot from that. And so for timing of it, there's no set rule. I mean, there's days when I'll generally start fast and slow down. I mean, you're going to find out if the speed works pretty quick. And if it doesn't, then just start slowing down from there.
As we're going to get warmer and warmer and warmer. It's pretty warm right now, I'll be honest.
I
outside,
can feel
it's
it.
Beautiful. It's warm. But as it gets warmer in the summer, you're going to have more and more weed growth.
Uh-huh.
Like to the point where on some of these lakes, like it almost turns into a mat down in the south. Like there's like a bunch of weed floating on top from all the boats stirring it up, filled in a whole cabbage bed, and there's lily pads, and you have to punch through it if you want to fish that area. But as the weeds get thicker, like do bass change? Primarily like largemouth. Like are they still going to be there, or do weeds ever get thick enough they get choked out?
Very rarely. I honestly think in the Kawarthas, there's no such thing as too shallow. Like I've literally caught bass with their back out of, you're like, what is that? And you throw a frog up there and poof, it's a fish. So I don't think there's anything such thing as too shallow. There's some invasive species of weeds that will choke an area out. You guys will have to bring that up in your educational segments because I'm not smart enough to tell you exactly what the spiny needle, whatever it is. There's different areas that choke it up. But for the most part, it seems way too thick to us, but that's as much as underwater stuff that I shoot. And that is honestly my biggest obsession of all things I do now. Like literally, I have the greatest life. I get to host a show. I get to work with bass. I get to, do the podcast stuff. But one of my probably my favorite thing, the thing that like brings me to center is shooting underwater stuff. And I've learned like they live in it as thick as you can. I don't think there is such a thing as too thick because down there you're seeing it from above. So it looks like, wow, that's impenetrable. But those are all layers. And when you swim through it, you're like, oh no, there's all little canals and areas through here. So I don't think there is such a thing as too thick a weed unless it's totally choking out a bay and it's an invasive species. Like you do see some situations like that. But for the most part, there's no such thing as milfoil being too thick or eelgrass being too thick. That's like saying, oh, there's no animals that live in this forest. There's too much oxygen in trees. I mean, it's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah. So much like a rainforest, like all the weeds out there, they have a canopy, right?
Yeah.
So it's thick on top, but opens up because then there's not as much light reaching down through. So it's got to empty out a bit.
Yeah. Very good analogy. Can I rip that off?
Absolutely.
100%.
Anything I say, you can repeat. You probably won't want to, but you have full freedom to do so. Talking about gear then. So we talked before about how, weight is something that is a common mistake, but what kind of gear should we be using? And I'm sure Jesse's going to bring up the fact that, I've cast hollow body frogs and, hollow body spiders through boat docks and thick weeds, and then we have to paddle in and get it. So let's ask a pro here. What is the correct rods to use to have a good presentation when we're flipping and pitching?
Well, first of all, Andrew, get better at casting. And,
yeah.
And you'll have less problems is the first move.
Oh, I hook fish, I catch fish. We just got to paddle in to get them. That's
yeah.
So just a little bit of a backstory. I grew up fishing Pigeon River since I was yay high, flipping, frogging, slop. Andrew fished more up north near Bancroft, not as much weeds, right?
Algonquin lakes and stuff like that.
Nice. I've got flipping sticks, super heavy line, all that stuff, and we'll go frog fishing, and he'll just pull out his spinning rod and put a frog on it, or like a 7-foot medium heavy, and I'm like, "What are you doing, man?" So every fish he hooked, we'd have to paddle in after it to reach down and grab
mono.
it. Yeah. And I'm just cranking them and just reeling them over the top. One day I'll get him to buy a flipping stick.
And Andrew,
we got it now.
You host a hit podcast too, while still
I've learned a lot
throwing
from
frogs
doing
on
the
10-pound
podcast.
mono.
Hey, we said average Ontario anglers. We didn't say we were good.
Well, okay, you did. You're right. You're right.
So anyway, what kind of gear would you recommend? Because a lot of our listeners, they're people that already fish,
Yeah.
but sometimes they're just the average guy or girl fishing, and they might own not a lot of combos like us. So what would you recommend?
Which, trust me, we've all been there. I mean, I'm very lucky that I get to use a lot of different equipment, and it's easy to be like, oh, wow, look, that guy doesn't understand. Trust me, I was an idiot who once bought a downrigger rod at a garage sale. No joke, because we were broke as a joke. And I bought a downrigger rod because it seemed like it had a thick blank. And I thought this would be a flipping stick. Turns out exact opposite action you want. I was an idiot child, didn't know better. But when it comes to that thicker stuff, I'm always going to throw a 7'6" if I can, medium heavy. I try to go medium heavy. I don't go super heavy, where a lot of people will be super heavy. I feel like you need some tip. I mean, because there's a lot of times where tip will allow you to check a fish. You throw a jig under a dock and a fish is swimming with it. If it's totally stiff, you can't check on that fish. You know what I mean? Like you need a little give, especially with braided lines and everything that everybody's using nowadays. But I'm always going to go with the 7.6 for both, for flipping, for frogging, 7.6 medium heavy rod. People will look at that for flipping, but then they're like, maybe a little shorter for frogs. No, you want line pickup. So that 7.6, in my opinion, allows you to cast that bait a little further and think about it when you're frog fishing. I'm so ADD. We have left flipping and we are straight to frogging right now. We'll get back, promise. But think of how many times you catch a fish at the very end of your cast when you first cast it. You know what I mean? So if you can add an extra 10 feet of cast, you're going to have extra opportunities to catch fish. So I'll always go 7.6, medium heavy, probably 30 to 50 pound test braided line. You don't want to go with a super high gear ratio reel. At that point, I'm going to go 7.2 to 1, something like that, because you want power. As your gear ratio goes up, the actual power drops down. So that's when you get a reel that slips. So higher gear ratio's got its place. I just don't think it's in the thick stuff.
Yeah, less torque for sure.
Yeah.
I found that interesting because I have a whole bunch of flipping rods and I've used a bunch of different kinds to try to settle on what I actually prefer. And I've noticed myself that I prefer the mod fast rods, the moderate fast action, as opposed to the fast action rods, because it loads up a lot better and it makes pitching easier because your rod blank loads up. It lets you cast more accurately. And then when you do give the beans to the fish and you set the hook really hard, especially with braided line, the rod actually has a good bend to it. It's more not super parabolic, but it's parabolic, which definitely helps when you're fighting the fish and getting it back into the boat. So a rod that's heavy, but not too stiff.
Yeah.
Because a rod that's too stiff, it may sound like a good idea in heavy cover, but it's generally not in my experience anyway. So
something's got to give, right? I mean, that hook's either going to pull out of the fish, your line's going to break. You've got no give anywhere. I mean, your line doesn't stretch anymore. Hooks are sharper than they've ever been. So you have to have a little bit of
nice
give.
Hat, by the way.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you. You guys use BKKs?
Ask Andrew.
Jesse won't shut up about them.
Oh, they're awesome. They're great hooks.
We're going fishing. Anytime we go fishing, and he's like, he'll catch a fish, and he's like,
BKK. They're the best hooks I've ever used.
Like, but Jesse attributes every one of his catches now to the fact that it was a BKK hook. I'm like, OG Finland Rapala hooks from the 60s. I get BKK. No, I'm not bashing them. They are amazing.
I was like,
I love them
that
too.
muskie just swiped at it, and if it wasn't BKK's, I would not have connected with it. Meanwhile, the whole bait's down its mouth. I'm like, it's not. It was the BKK's.
Yeah, but if you fell out of love with them, hooks are a very personal thing. And that's what I tell people about BKK, because they got a lot of cool hook designs, and the OCD box is super cool for organizing your hooks and stuff like that. When people are like, so why should I use BKK? And generally, I'll just give them a pack of BKKs and say, go use them, because that is the best way for people to get faith in them. I mean, they're just a great hook, and hooks are such a weird thing. We way underrate it, like where you think of how much people spend on a lure, and, and there's some of that really high end JDM stuff that you get that the hooks aren't great on them. And people won't even, they're like, well, I paid $32 for this and I had to bid on it in a special sealed bid auction, but the hooks aren't good. you need good hooks to catch fish, no matter what you're fishing for.
That's what makes the connection. Literally, that is the connection between the fish and you. You can have the greatest presentation, but if the tackle that is actually connecting that fish to you is inferior, you're not going to land it.
Yeah, you spend $500 on a rod and reel, then buy a cheap pack of hooks at the
Dollarama hooks.
I was just going to say, speaking of BKKs, I fish a little bit of straight shank, and I jump around from different brands because, again, like as anglers, we want to find exactly what we want, so we have that perfect confidence. And the BKK ones, they're super sharp, obviously, but just the quality on them, like where the little hook keeper is, it's like epoxied on. I've had other brands where it looks like it's just kind of heat shrinked on, and it kind of just gets loose and eventually slides off. And you're like, what the heck? I just spent, $12.99 for a pack of hooks and the thing doesn't even work. But I've had really good success with the straight shanks. We've been trying, me and Andrew, a bunch of different, like for musky hooks for sure, but also bass hooks, and they're great hooks.
The cool thing about that keeper that I didn't know, a lot of keepers are much bigger than that. And when you first look at it, you'd be like, oh, big keeper's the way you want to go. A bigger keeper's going to keep your plastic on there better. But it's actually the opposite, because a bigger keeper makes a bigger hole when you're rigging it.
Plastic.
So it actually pulls off more. That keeper will actually save you some baits too, I find.
Definitely, because even little things like that make a big difference. Because when you're using a straight shank, like they're great hooks, but they rip your bait apart when you're catching a lot of fish. So even if that little design helps you get a few more fish out of each bait, you're saving money.
Yeah.
Plus, then you can say to your fishing buddy, BKK. They won't know what it means.
Well, to bring us back on topic here, I'm not
done talking about BKK.
Those are great hooks, but to get back on point,
oh wow, wow.
That wasn't as good.
That was
what kind
strong.
Of baits do you?
I was sharp, is what some would say.
Thank you. I like that. What are some baits that you would recommend? You can name brands, like specific ones, or you can be general about it. And then, what kind of baits would you like to use for flipping? And then also, as a side tangent, we were talking about, do you prefer an EWG style hook or a straight shank? Or is there a reason why you choose one or the other?
Okay, as far as baits go, my punching flipping bait is a crash craw. It's a new Berkeley bait that's been out the last few years. And I'll pull one out here to show you. Here's what you want in a flipping bait, in my opinion. People will spend an awful lot of time showing you baits with all sorts of appendages and craziness and all sorts of stuff. When you're flipping, again, you just want that bait to get down there. You want something to fall in front of that fish. Quite often, the fish doesn't spend as much time as we think looking at it and investigating it. I mean, it just falls and the fish reacts to it. I always say it's like if three of us were together and I pulled my car keys out and threw them at you, you wouldn't stop to be like, what's he throwing at me? You would just swipe it away. And that's what a fish does with their mouth. So this is a bite getter, if you ask me. A perfect little punching bait, something small, not near as big. All those Florida tournaments that you see guys doing that and they're catching 10s and stuff, you think they're throwing a big bait. It's not. Quite often it's pretty compact. And if you put, a 3/4 ounce weight on that, that'll get through the thickest slop to a 1 ounce weight, depending on where you are and how thick it is. But that is my punch and bait. As far as hooks go, I'm a straight shank guy. EWG's got a place. There's times when I'll throw it, I'll throw it when I'm throwing a jerk sad, like a fluke style bait, something like that. I'll throw an EWG in that. But I'm going straight shank every single time I'm flipping, and just simply because I feel I lose less fish for it. I mean, the pull is all going one direction, and that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, if you watch a lot of like videos with pros, like they're either one or the other. And they're like, no, I like EWG or I like this. So you just have to really try both and see what works best for you.
Yeah.
Because some people absolutely hate straight shanks. I don't know why. I love them, but yeah. I'll have to make Andrew use them this year coming up.
I have used some already. The actual science of the leverage, the mathematics between the pressure point by using a straight shank versus the EWG kind of offset. Yes, you actually have way more connection and higher hookup ratio on the straight shank than an EWG. So I've logicked myself into using them as well.
Well, and the next level, and I don't do this. I mean, I host a TV show, but the next level is so many pros, they won't tie direct either. They'll snell it, because the whole theory behind a snell is if you snell that, then when you set the hook, your hook pivots the right direction. I'm not that guy, just so you know. Listen, I don't friggin' tie an FG. I just, like, there's certain
Crazy
things that
Alberto?
I think. What's that?
Are you a crazy Alberto knot kind of guy for main
No,
leader?
dude, but I join two lines. I use a line called a knot. It's kind of like a variation of the uni to uni. It's called the 3-finger knot because a dude with 3 fingers taught it to us on Lake Erie once. And I figured if that dude with 3 fingers can do it, I can do it. I'm still not sure I do it as well as him, but I also feel like, and I think a lot of your viewers will relate with this, the best knot you tie is the knot you tie. So if you tie a polymer and have for years and you're just really good at it, and like every angler listening to this knows, like when your knot cinches in and clunk, that's right. And you also know when you're like, I tied that, it feels right, but it's not, and you retie. So there is a lot of high-end stuff where people will snell. People use FGs and stuff like that. I keep it simple. I mean, I still remind myself that we're chasing a critter that has a brain the size of your pinky nail. If it didn't bite my bait because I didn't use an FG, then I didn't deserve to catch that freaking bass anyways.
It's true.
What about, like, how stealthy do you have to be when fishing cover? This kind of relates to both this topic, but also frogging and stuff. We're fishing heavy cover. Like, we all grew up in Shore with our dad telling us, be quiet because the fish will hear you talking on the boat. And really, that's just he was getting bored of you chittering.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
But how stealthy do we
Ken.
have to be? Like, do these fish normally feel secure because they're in their home and you can get obviously fairly close, or what sets them off?
It all depends where you're fishing. If you're fishing a body of water that's got nonstop traffic and stuff, they're probably used to that. But I believe you can't be stealthy enough. The quieter you are, the easiest fish to catch, no matter what you're fishing for, is a fish that doesn't know you're there. The hardest fish to catch is a fish that knows you're there. The show I host does a disservice to it because you always see my boat come blasting in, come off. I run to the front deck, and then we're fishing. That's for TV. To be totally honest, I take it off pad way back there. I'll putt in or trolling motor in. A little extra time pays off huge. And it's not just stuff from boats. I mean, if you got a lot of listeners that do it from shore, it's the exact same feeling.
Stomping on the shore sends out shockwaves. Crazy. Yeah.
It's nuts. And you see fish go poof and take off. Again, it's the same thing when I'm shooting underwater stuff. I'm swimming with these fish. They're not intimidated by me. They're not scared of me. The way they take off from me is totally different. But if I come bouncing down the shoreline, they learned a long time ago that things, and it's not we think, they think the fishermen are here, the anglers are here. No, they just know that when things come from shore, from the time when they're this big, it's not a good experience for them. So I'm all about being stealthy in every single way you can, whether it be shore fishing, boat fishing, everything, your shadow, all of that. Take it all into account.
So what you're saying is don't pull a Keith Pochet and jump a beaver dam through to a new spot. Unless you're trying to fish around the beaver dam. That'd be bad.
I mean, I don't do a lot of the things that Keith Pochet does, to be honest.
I was going to add one thing about the whole stealthiness thing is I got a power pole just for the flatback canoe, just the actual pole. And I run it through just a little loop at the back. And I noticed if you're on the trolling motor a lot, say there's a little bit of wind and you're fishing around some lily pads and you're constantly on the trolling motor, I honestly think that scares the fish off. So what I started doing is positioning the boat, jamming the power pole down and then I'll just let the boat settle and then I'll just fish that pad bed or that area completely quiet. Fish finders turned off, trolling motors turned off. I'm just floating. And again, I'm in a canoe. I'm not in a bass boat. So it's just like a floating log in the water. And sometimes I'll look down and bass or muskie will swim like right underneath the boat, like I'm not there. So that's a great tip, Dave, that sometimes these fish, they're super spooked in. Like sometimes you'll be driving through a spot to get to the spot and you'll spook fish out of the way, not knowing they were there. And it's like, if you had slowed down a little bit and been more stealthy, maybe you would have caught them, right?
Yeah. And in the Keith Pochet analogy, I mean, he's jumping a beaver dam to get to somewhere where nobody's fished in forever. So, and he never catches them first few casts. You know what I mean? Like fish are smart, but they don't think like us. They just react. You know what I mean? Where we think about things and we think, what was that noise? They don't. They just know, get out of here. But they quickly recess back. That's why you can't kill yourself on if you have to make a little noise to get in there, get in there. Here's the worst thing. And sorry, Andrew, this is totally not beat up on Andrew night. That's in June. We'll do that. The worst thing though is if you can nuke a spot by just having to go in after a fish. So that's why I'm always going to try and not do that, because when you go in there, there's in most situations, docks, weed beds, whatever, there's multiple fish. Like, as it's frustrating for all of us, because you go fishing and you're like, there's no fish here. But if you actually spend some time under the water, you're like, there's fish everywhere. I mean, they're not all 5-pounders, but there is 2 to 3 pound bass everywhere in the Kawarthas. So if you catch one fish of a dock, you don't want to nuke that dock by having to go in after it. So Andrew, let me send you some better line.
Okay. New flipping stick wouldn't hurt either.
I'll send you that downrigging rod. Try this out, sucker.
I just wanted to give a quick aside little story of trying to be stealthy. There's been a few times where, we fish out of a tinner. I got a 14-foot tinner, fishing on these Kawartha lakes or whatnot, or anywhere. And I turn off the big motor a while back. I motor in from like 100 feet away plus on the trolling motor, getting in nice and quiet. And I was like, I want to fish a different bait. And I reached out for my tackle tray and it just falls to the bottom of the boat. Like, we call it calling the Kraken. It's like, boom. I'm like, oh no.
You just see all these wakes of fish swimming away. God damn it.
Like, so yeah. I do feel that especially loud noises make a difference.
Yeah. And noises they're not used to, and sudden noises like that. Because if you think about it, like if you're making noise and it's just genuinely getting there, like I think if you've got your trolling motor and you've got it set on a medium to low setting and you're just cruising over a bay, that noise is slowly approaching the fish. So it's not I have analogies for everything, but it's literally like if you hear a vehicle coming that's playing music, and you hear it coming from a long way away, and you hear doo, 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 and it builds. It's not near as offensive as if all of a sudden you're just standing there waiting for the bus. And
if it's a constant noise,
not that meat.
Good point. Especially if you're not hitting, into stumps and dropping tackle in your tin boat. And I'd like to add one thing just about stealth, because, me and Andrew fish out of, kayaks, canoes, small boats. We talked to a few people and previous episodes. We were talking to Jay Siemens a few episodes back, right? And we were talking about the advantages of fishing from a small boat. And I'm going to get into that in my Jesse's YouTube recommendations about fishing from a paddleboard, but we're going to get into that later. But fishing from a small craft, you are at a massive advantage at this point for fishing for largemouth in weeds. Not only can you get into anywhere, like me and Andrew have gotten to the skinniest past beaver dam like places ever.
You have to portage like into a bay because there's a big, reef in front of it.
Yeah,
bass boats aren't getting in there.
Don't think for a second that I don't own a bass boat or a big boat, I'm doomed. No, like you're at an advantage. So that's one thing.
And you can go to fisheries that a bass boat never can. Like you're going to put a little more work in, but it does. A buddy of mine, Marshall, he does a lot of paddleboard fishing, and that's why he does it. He's a YouTube guy, the homeless fisherman.
Oh yeah, I've seen that guy.
But his goal in life is to catch the next world record bass. I get it, a hugely lofty goal, but you'd think that you'd want a bass boat and everything. He's like, no, I honestly believe that the next my shot at catching a record is off of a paddleboard or something where I can access areas that other people can't. So yeah, the guy in a bass boat's actually at a disadvantage. Make fun of him when you pass him at Tim Hortons in the morning. Loser.
We used to try to taunt them at the lake, but then they drove by us and almost flipped us over. So we stopped that. We always yell at them too when they're filling up their gas tank and we're buying 1 gallon for a little 2.5 in the back. I was going to say, Andrew, if you don't mind, I'll do my YouTube recommendations now,
and then we'll move on to frogs after.
Yeah, it kind of goes into what we're talking about. So every other episode, since I watch a lot of fishing YouTube, I watch everything I can get my eyes on, because during work I'll play it as I'm working, so I can listen and watch some of the stuff. So we always recommend different shows, but I thought since we had Dave Mercer on the show, which is a bit surreal, that I would recommend 3 of my personal favorite YouTube videos of Dave's show. Now, these are a bit older ones, but these are the ones that they relate to me the most, because I probably have watched these individually probably like 5 or 6 times or more each. So I'm going to tell you these ones. Maybe when I say the episode, Dave, you can just, if you remember that episode, you can say, what you remember about it or whatever. So one was actually thinking of saying paddleboard. So one of my favorite episodes you ever did, you were fishing, remember you were frog fishing on a paddleboard?
Yeah.
And I just thought it was hilarious because not only were you fishing like an insane lake full of bass, it was all like slop and lily pads, but Dave is trying to fish and do massive hook sets while standing on a paddleboard. And during the episode, you fell in multiple times. And it was just a funny, hilarious episode.
And relatable.
It was insane. And I'd never seen anyone do that before. I was like, this guy's hilarious. He's nuts too. Because I'm like, there's got to be so many leeches and stuff in there.
Oh.
Snapping turtles.
That show, and I'm an idiot also on top of that, because most people that are on TV would be like, okay, I'll go learn how to use a paddleboard. But I intentionally was like, no, I'm going to learn how to do this on camera. It went a lot better than I would have imagined. Like, I didn't wipe out until the very end. And thank God for GoPros being strapped all over it. And the funny thing is, if you see some of the aerial shots on it, they were in a bass boat. I mean, it wasn't like they were shooting out of my bass boat. So they were all calm and whatever, and I was trying to balance all day. The one thing I did not think through is deer flies. If you are going to fish off a stand-up paddleboard and you're going to fish in a marsh like I was that is full of bass and also full of deer flies, wear some kind of little booties or something. I did not.
Ankle biters.
And it was just like, because when you get wet, it makes those worse. So it was like a double-edged sword. Like I'd shake the board to get it wet so I could knock the flies off my feet. But the wetness of my feet would actually attract more flies. My ankles, I had cankles when that thing was done.
You got to get some dragonflies on your hat. Get some like
that's
plastic
what they
ones on
say.
the board and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys tried that? Does it really work?
I have a couple of the clips. I used it at the cottage, and yeah, I have to say, like, normally they're getting the back of the head, they're getting your and I didn't see any. Like, it kept him at bay.
So why did we waste 10 minutes talking about DEET at the beginning of this whole thing?
Now, so a brief aside then, to address that, deer flies, horse flies aren't affected by DEET. But they are visual because they don't hunt by smell, they hunt visually. So the dragonfly, it eats pretty much anything, any other bug, but the dragonfly does not repel mosquitoes or blackfly, things that follow our scent. The dragonfly deters things that hunt with sight because they are looking at us, but they'll see, there's my predator that is going to kill me. So that's why it works on those vision-focused bugs. So you have to combine the two, but you can, which is great.
Combine the two. All right, next video that I thought was really good. I think I'm just recalling certain things that you said or did during the episode that I thought was funny. And it was the one, again, I'm going to link all these below in the show notes. You can just click on the link and it'll take you right to the video so you can watch it. But it's a video. It's called Fishing a Rat for Topwater Largemouth. Kind of keeping on topic here, but I remember you're fishing, I think it was like the live target mouse.
Yeah.
Which me and Andrew both have used and caught fish on. And as you're fishing it, you're walking it back and forth and you're just like, I'm just an innocent little mouse. Come on and eat me. Just as you're talking to your bait, and then a bass would just come up, and the footage was fantastic. Just bass come up, you see it bulging behind it and explode on it. But yeah, I love that. I bought the mouse because of that. And me and Andrew were fishing this lake up near Bancroft, and we were literally just smashing fish on them. So those were the good old days, right, Andrew?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Are you not allowed to go there anymore?
No, it's one of those lakes that's like no motors. So we're pretty lazy now. So
that happens. Trust me.
Yeah. We're like, well, we have a motor. Do you want to fish that lake and paddle it? And it's like, nah.
There's our other accessible
we'll go back one day.
lakes we can put the motor on. That are also just as good for fishing. So
yeah. And then the last video I'll mention, if you're someone that does not own a boat or even a canoe or paddleboard or anything like that, beating the bank for bucket mouse is one where you fished from shore. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of opportunities in Ontario to catch largemouth, especially frog fishing, especially, I would say, but also flipping, pitching from shore. You don't need a boat. All you need is a rod and a reel, a few baits, a jig, whatever, and you can go out and catch bass. Some of the best bass that we've caught have just been like around the dock as we're launching our boat.
Yeah.
I'll be launching the boat and he's already out there casting, of course. That's always Andrew, right? And every time he'll catch like a 3 or 4 pounder, like right beside the dock. I'm like, what? Because I think a lot of guys come in, they'll weigh their fish and then they release them right by the launch, right? Those fish chill there for probably days or weeks. Who knows?
I think the statistics are like 75% of fish released stay within half a kilometer where they're released. They don't go back to like the other side of the lake where you caught them. Like majority of them don't.
especially if they've got everything they need there. Depending on where you do your release, but if they've got everything they need, they stick around. And you think about it. Think of how many of people aren't much different than Andrew. That when you go somewhere, think of how many of your buddies, their kid, whoever, rented a cottage, went to a buddy's cottage and caught a big one off the dock. It's also because they kind of just were stuck there cast in that area. And if you're in a boat, you don't spend 10 minutes fishing that little area by a dock. You fish the dock, you make a few casts, you move to the next one. By just sticking it out and fishing that area, there's always lots of fish in them. So yeah, no, that is one thing that there's a ton of good fishing shorelines. I mean, literally everybody wants that easy, like, where do you go and where's this? You could literally just go to boat ramps and you'll find spots to fish around boat ramps, especially all those places. If you watch a lot of the Kawartha Lakes, as the season goes on, more tournaments get won closer to home because more fish have been brought back and released there. In tournament fishing, they call it fishing for retreads because but there's a lot of dudes who have made a lot of money fishing for retreads over the years.
Yeah. And another tip I would say is, I don't know how other people are, but if we're ever like launching our boat or fishing or going out to go fishing, if anyone would ever say to me like, hey, do you know any spots I can fish from shore around here? 100% I'm going to tell them. And I almost guarantee most anglers would do the same. They'd be like, oh, there's a nice spot up there. You just drive up the road. Like, we'll tell people all the time, like in the area, they're already here. They're ready to fish. Be like, okay, get in your car, drive up there. There's a nice spot by the bridge you can fish under. 100%.
Or there's a public park right on the lake over there.
Yeah.
It's all Googleable locations anyways.
Yeah.
Unlike Andrew, most anglers are pretty polite on the water.
That's right. I'm the mean one between us.
Yeah.
His beard is very intimidating, I'll be honest. It's very intimidating.
So I like those episodes. I really like Dave's episode, just as a shout back or shout out. When I first met you, like I was telling you earlier, like years ago in that Bass Pro Shops, I think the only thing I said to you is like, hey, I loved your episode Fishing for Arctic Char. And that's the first episode I ever saw of your show. And I've seen that thing so many times, but that's turned into a bucket list trip for me. Like, I want to go to like Northwest Territories and fish for Arctic Char like that.
It is. We're trying to schedule a trip for this year. That's where the drawback of doing a bunch of things hurts me, because I have opportunity to go there, but it's always trying to fit it in. But Plummer's Lodge, Great Bear Lake, then you fly out to Tree River, where all of the Arctic Char records have come from. You can fish for them up when they get up the river and they're like that bright red, that stereotypical, or you can fish for them out front in the mouth where they're super silver. I mean, literally there's walruses and stuff there. It is. When people say, like, I've been lucky to travel a bunch over the years. I've traveled as far north as Nunavik, the Arctic Ocean, and I've traveled as far south as Brazil. And those are the two places where I've honestly been in my life where I was like, am I really here? Like when you're in the Arctic, you're like, it is just so beautiful and so vast. And you're like, for as far as I can see, I'm the only human being, which is so rare in today's world. So it's definitely a good bucket list thing to have.
Well, I just want to put out, Jesse and I are not above, bribery and selling out to TV shows. If you need some co-anglers on one of those destination ones.
All right. I'll keep that in mind.
Andrew is great walrus bait, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'll distract the bears from you.
When about 6 months, when you release this podcast, we'll see what the feedback's like and see what we can do.
I'll tell you what, if it does better than the one with Jay Siemens, we'll talk. We'll see.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
I see how it is.
We're going to move onto some frogs kind of briefly, because a lot of the stuff carries over from flipping and pitching.
Yeah.
We're still fishing the same areas, still heavy cover. Dave's recommendation for the rod apparently hasn't changed. Same setup for frogging. What are some best conditions for frogging? Let's say, for season or time of day weather, what are some things that you would say, this is either 100% you should have just don't bother with frogging, or like put a good effort to try frogging because these signs are pointing to it should work?
I think that it almost always works. It's just to what level it works. I mean, if you lock a frog in your hand, you're going to get bites. There's very few days you're not going to get bites. There's days when they're swiping at it a little more, and there's days when they're inhaling it. But I really just look at the activity of the water. Like, there's a lot of things you can learn going to the water in the morning. Like, this sounds nasty, but when you're driving to fish in the morning, you see a bunch of frogs that got smushed overnight. generally that's a good sign that it's a good time to throw a frog, throw a topwater. You got lots of movement and things like that. I mean, that is a telltale really wherever you go, where you can tell all of a sudden, okay, the fish are in a good feeding because they're active, they're moving. And so that's where I'm going to go. Then the more active the fish are, the easier a frog is to fish. The biggest mistake with a frog that you see is people miss fish. I mean, it is the most loved and most hated bait at and I mean, you guys told me we don't swear in this podcast. Well, you know what? Good luck fishing a frog then, because you're going to probably swear at some point because it is so frustrating at times. But there's simple little things that I've learned over the years. I never fish my frog with my rod tip down, ever. Like if you notice, my rod tip is always up. Couple of reasons. It keeps your line above all the obstructions, like the seam of a pad bed or something like that. But it also forces me to let the fish eat it. When you think about it, if your rod tips down and a fish blows up on it, you initially want to hammer that fish. And a lot of times that's too soon. I mean, the fish hasn't had a chance. Again, go back to underwater footage. The amount of times where I see how a fish repositions a frog, we think, he hasn't taken the frog. A lot of times we're setting the hook on that fish right as that fish opens its mouth to reposition the frog, which it does with a natural frog, which it does with a plastic frog. It is amazing to me how they'll blow up on it and then they'll just kind of puff it out and then re-inhale it. But what happens is if you're the guy who's got his rod tipped down, that fish blows up, and at the very same moment when that fish is just repositioning it, you try to cross its eyes, that bait comes flying down, hits you in the forehead, and thus the swearing begins. Yep. Keep your rod tip up, and what it'll do is it'll force you to just lower that rod tip by yourself sometime, and you will catch more fish with it.
That's a great tip, because I think we called it, what was it, premature ejaculation? Yeah. When you jerk the rod too quick and pull it right out of their mouth.
That can happen.
Jesse struggles with that. I got to throw him under the bus now because I've been hating on myself enough this episode. But Jesse's pretty notorious with that. I'm one of those guys where thankfully, the type where I'll wait to see my line start to track, or I'll give it that
he's good.
1, 2, okay, then pinner.
And then we go in and paddle in after the fish.
I have better rods and reels now, Jesse. But the hookup ratio is pretty good, but waiting is key. I know on the back of the Scum Frog packages, it has instructions on how to use baits. A lot of the baits will have that, right? It'll say, when a fish eats your frog, wait 2 seconds before setting the hook. It says it on the back of the package, and I know normally you just never read it.
Yeah.
But that's important to do because, like you said, they don't have it actually in its position until after they're back underwater and just starting to swim away.
Yeah.
That's when it's in position to set the hook.
And on that package, the 2 seconds feels like it makes sense. But in real life, those 2 seconds, the entire world stops. Like if it's you two in a boat, goof, the big blow up. And it's like, while you're waiting, whoever you're fishing with is like, is he going to catch him or is he going to screw this up again? And the more you screw it up, the more you start to feel your pulse in your neck. And that 2 seconds does not feel like 2 seconds.
Absolutely.
So true.
Are there any other, that's probably, that is a very good tip. Probably one of the best tips I've heard for giving, a way to give a bit of time on the hook set. Are there any other changes that you can make to perhaps your tackle, your rod, in order to increase hookup percentages on frogs?
I've messed with different things. I've done the one leg shorter than the other. I mean, it's great for a YouTube video, but I'll be honest, for as many times as that's fixed a frog, that's also not helped. You know what I mean? There's some frogs that just are not. And that's one of the things I will say, take care of your frogs. People jam a bunch of plastic frogs into their Plano box, and they think nothing of it. And then you pull it out and it's just got a little bit of a crease to it, but now all of a sudden it's pulling to the left every time you try to jerk it. So take care of your frogs. I'm not a real scientist on making one leg shorter than the other. I've literally made videos saying to do that. And since then, my mind has changed because I've just spent enough time messing with it and been like, okay, that makes sense. But I do trim the legs always. I try to get them. So if you take the skirt of it and you pull it up, I want it to get to the front of the hook max. You know what I mean? That's kind of a good eyeball. So if you pull it, that shows you where to trim it. Another thing that I've messed around with that I think has helped in situations is actually, and this is a juicy tip, get some fly line floatant. Like you go to the fly department and get fly line floatant and put it on the first, foot to 2 feet of your line. That helps your line float. Braid floats, but this is going to help it float even more. And it just makes that frog work a little better. There's a lot of those little things, but ultimately throw a frog and throw a frog a lot. And if you want to become good at fishing a frog or anything, lock that thing in your hand. Treat it like you're learning it. And that's the weird thing in fishing. We don't treat things like that. We think about them they're just not, we blame the fish. Like we're like a bunch of kids blaming the remote, like the controller when you were a kid. I pressed jump. I didn't lose this video game. I pressed jump. It's not the fish's fault. It's our fault in most situations because we jump around and we don't really learn how to fish a bait properly. So whether it's a jig, a frog, whatever, my tip to everybody, if you want to become a good frog angler, bring a frog, bring nothing else. Maybe a follow-up bait, like a punching bait, if it's one of those days where they're rolling on it but not quite getting it. But just go frog fishing, and you'll get really good with it. You'll learn how to skip it under docks. You'll learn how to do all sorts of things. But if you just are tiptoeing into it, and that's the same for everything. You want to get good at throwing a jig? Just tie on a jig and go jig fishing. And think of it like you think of other sports. I mean, if you want to get into golf, and you're not good at putting, you're going to go practice putting. If you're not good at getting it out of a sand bunker, you're going to go practice that. And fishing is the same. Especially when you go to those sneaky little places, like the place you just talked about where you can't use a motor and the fishing's really good. Those are batting cage days. Those are days when you're somewhere where you're going to get bites. And there is no better way to get confidence in a bait than get bites. So when you go to those places, use it as a learning opportunity.
And how do you work the frog? Because I've done them all. I've reeled it in straight. I've just kind of chugged it forward and it keeps just popping forward a bit. You walk it in. I'm a big fan of like just letting it sit. Like I'll walk it. I'll even chug it or walk it forward into a little hole where I have if it hits there, I'll have a better hookup ratio and I just let it pause. I let it sit for like 5 seconds, pull it into the next hole in the line and then, let it sit. How do you like to work a frog? And, is there definitely a bad way to do it?
I don't think there is, because I've seen people who just straight reel them in and catch them on it. And I've seen people, I try to add action. I'm always popping it. My retrieve is probably faster than most people. I'm not bragging about that or anything. Speed's a disadvantage in certain things in life. But no, I'm just hyper, and I believe in covering water. And there's been times where I've had to slow down, but I think speed is a big thing. Here's the weird thing. I used to always kill my frog like you do. And I do to a certain extent, but here's the weirdest thing. I've shot underwater footage of fish eating real frogs. And do you realize that like when a frog is moving, they're tracking it. As soon as that frog stops moving, they'll get right under it. And if it stays still, they'll just turn away and not eat it, which is the weirdest thing in the world, because you're like, that thing's defense is not to move, but we're killing it. But I think the killing it isn't so much to eat it when they're just sitting there. It's they eat it when you start popping it again. The killing it it's the law of difference, I think, so to speak. But my retrieve, similar to flipping, you're going to want to mess with different retrieves, but I always try to pop it, always try to add a little action to it. To me, the more noise you make over that stuff, the better. I've really gotten into a poppin' frog, which I wasn't a big poppin' frog guy before, but that Berkeley Swamp Lord is... Which, here's how stupid I am. Berkeley said, we're coming out with the frog. I'm like, you're 5 years too late. Nobody needs a new frog. Let me give you my expert opinion. Couldn't have been told more wrong, because actually the world did need a new frog in the way that there wasn't a bunch of others being introduced at the time. So it actually got its opportunity to shine. And for whatever reason, it's just one of those frogs that gets bit.
I love it too.
Yeah, and the poppin' one, I mean, you can walk it, you can spit it. It does a lot. So I kind of use the popping one all in the open water and in pads. But if I'm strictly in real thick stuff, I'll use kind of a walking frog. But I'm always kind of varying my retrieve until the fish figure out, tell me what they want.
And when it comes to color, that's probably a big debate, because a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't matter. The fish are looking up. All they're seeing is a shadow. But I've had days where we generally use black or white.
Yeah.
Myself. And I've had days when I'm fishing black and we're getting short strikes, they're just not eating it, and then we'll switch to white, and all of a sudden they start eating it. I don't know if it's just the change of the day or the color. What's your opinion on that?
I try to stay dark. I think dark, when a fish looks up, if you go in a swimming pool and you look up at anything floating, it looks dark. And the darker it is, the easier it is to see. So that's kind of my theory on that. But I believe that a fish sees a lot more of the frog than we think. We all think that all they see, we see it in almost 2D. Like we're like, oh, it's just looking up. But if you look up, like you see the rounded sides of it, especially when it's rolling and stuff like that, you do see some color in it. And I think in the clearer water, it does make a difference. But if I had to pick one color of frog to fish always, it would be a black frog. I mean, a dark colored frog. It's just my go-to.
That's awesome. I like the natural colors. I like white a lot. But yeah, I have been trying to make sure I have, black frogs with me, and I've been using them more. And I personally haven't noticed a big difference, but again, I don't have the same experience as a lot of other guys, with frogging. You have more time in the water than us combined, I'm sure. In 1 year, you get more than we do in 5, probably.
Well, I used to get a lot. Now I talk about it a lot. I mean, that's the plight of being a professional angler. At one time, nobody wants to do anything. And then you're like, now I got to just fight to be on the water. So I don't get enough time on the water, but I do. I mean, the thing about frogs is it also depends where you're fishing them. Like, we're very spoiled. I mean, we think the rest of the world's like what we have here in Ontario, but it's not. Like, if you go to Alabama, there is no frogs. There's very few frogs. Like, most of the time, the frog is actually imitating a brim, something up on the surface. And that's why you see some crazy colors there. But yeah, I'm a dark guy for frogs, but I'll throw a white one. I think a white one's a little easier a lot of times just to track, keep your eye on. Frog's a great bait if you're getting kids into fishing. I mean, my kids, that's kind of where they started with it, just because it doesn't get hung up a lot. It's something they can watch all the time. It's visually appealing to them, so they're going to stay more engaged.
I agree. That's what we did with Andrew.
That's how I learned how to cast to lay downs and stuff, was fishing purely weedless lures. And yeah, that my casting has improved tremendously, I will say. So that's good. Do you have your best frog story? Everyone loves frogging because once you get that first blow up on it, you're hooked. Like, that's what you want to catch bass on forever and always now, is a frog.
Yeah.
But do you have like a extremely memorable story about frogging?
Yeah, I got a bunch of frog stories. I guess when I was a kid, so I was just, I mean, it's amazing how much it's changed. But when I was, 13 years old, I was just this weird fishing geek who, my first job ever was at Gagnon Sports. And how I got that job was I went to see Roger Party and I said, hey, I'd like to apply for a job. He says, you want to work in the fishing store? And I'm like, no, I have no interest in it whatsoever, but I'd like to be a professional angler one day. And I think I could meet the right people if I work here. So he hired me. But so I've always stood out as that weird guy who's that into fishing. And at that time, it stood out even more than it does today, because now we have so much high school and grade school fishing and collegiate fishing. But one of the guys that I got to know when I was really young is a guy that has passed since then, but his name was Jerry Moon. And he used to come up and fish the Canadian bass tournaments. And he was from Texas, and he would fish with a guy named Mac Teagarten. And they were, Jerry Moon and Mac Teagarten, nobody in Canada was fishing slop and doing all sorts of stuff like that. And I remember I'd fish tournaments. I was just a scrawny little kid. And I remember he literally made me, again, this is a horrible story because you asked me for a frog story, but I'm about to tell you a punching story. But I was trying to set the hook in these fish while they were in the slop, and I kept losing them. And he's like, oh, you don't have enough leverage, kid. And he stacked his tackle boxes on the deck of the boat and said, next time you feel a hit, stand in the tackle boxes. So I stood in the tackle boxes and set the hook and ended up getting them. So his leverage trick worked. But as far as frog fishing,
I've been using BKKs back then. That's what
I should have. I should have. That was a weak point in my game when I was 13 years. I had a lot of weak points in my game when I was 13 years old, to be honest. But yeah, I got a lot of frog stories. I'm trying to think of one that stands out. Like, if there's a short side to a frog, is I'm addicted to it. I just do it too much. Like, there's so many times where I am 100%. I know I'm forcing it. I should be like laying it off, but it's so addictive. We do too.
It's like November. It's like, any minute now.
But it's so worth
pre-spawn with frogs. I caught a few.
Yeah. I mean, the surface is the biggest. Like, we talk about weed lines and shade edges and stuff. That's the most obvious one to a fish. The surface of the water is the biggest edge. So there's frogs work when it's cold. They work at all times.
I just want to apologize to Dave mainly because we're soaking up a lot of your time because you have been very generous. And we were like, oh, it'll be an hour. We're like, we're past that.
It's fine. It's
But,
fine. I'll
Jesse
send
has
a very strongly worded email.
I'm sure, it's June. It's June now. I'm sure by August you'll forgive us. No worries.
Yeah.
But Jesse's got some listener questions. We'll just choose a couple of the best ones there.
Yeah.
And,
and usually when we do the Q&A, we keep our answers down to like 30 seconds or less. You don't have to go, go nuts.
So warning?
It's more of a threat.
It's more, yeah. So this is,
right.
I posted Ask Dave a question on our Patreon there. And Frank asked this question. This is a great question, by the way. He says, Dave, what have you learned from swimming with the fish that has changed the way that you catch fish?
Ooh, what haven't I learned? I think that we way overestimate how fish behave. Like when you spend enough time down there with them, their life, like we all think it's big, wide open mouth eats and stuff, because that's what you saw in commercials growing up. I mean, when the big bass comes behind the long A, that's what it's a big, and that is so rare. Like fish, in my opinion, spending time with them, a fish's life is like, what's that show? Walking Dead. Like literally, like, how, if you've ever watched Walking Dead, I mean, the people are trying to avoid the zombies and whatever's going on in the world, but they spend their whole life like just trying to eat and not be eaten. And that's how a fish is. The way they are so stealthy and don't exert any energy, you know what I mean? Unless they have to, and the way they eat things so differently. Like if you see the way a fish eats a shiner, for example, a fish eats a shiner. There's a reason they love shiners. If you watch a fish eat a shiner, it does that big traditional mouth wide open, and that shiner folds up and goes boom and is gone. If it eats a perch, it's a much more aggressive eat. Like then it's like boom, and which makes sense to me. If it eats a frog, it's a much more aggressive kind of like stun that bait when it eats it. That's why those frog blowups are so crazy when you see them, because the fish is actually trying to stun or kill that bait. So they eat things differently than we imagine, which has made me, and it also has made me just slow down in the way that like I'm fast. There's guys at KVD who I am very lucky, not to name drop, but he's one of my best friends, and he's made a career out of being fast. But in most situations,
no offense, but he's the GOAT.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's very good at bass fishing, it turns out.
I've heard, he's won a few classics.
He's bad at other things, but I won't bring those up. But he uses speed, and I think in some ways speed has been overhyped to all of us. An average angler, the biggest tip I can give you is slow down. There's fish where you're fishing. I know you think there's not because they're not eating, but the amount of times that you see a fish just not interested in a bait at all, like it just, when you spend enough time under the water, you realize this has been way over 30 seconds. Holy crap, I'm horrible at this. Next question. That was very bad.
No, that's good. We're only going to do one or two questions because a lot of the questions we pretty much covered through our ramblings.
Happens most of the time
about flipping and pitching. But no, that's a great tip, because I think we all think fishing wise, when we watch YouTube or read magazines, all that stuff, it's just like, this is the way we think things are, but it's not like that.
No.
So
slow down,
outside the box,
chill.
Why don't we just answer one more? And this is more of a not frogging and fishing question, but I thought it's pretty interesting. Jeff asks, what's your favorite on the lake snack?
I like oranges. Oranges like you used to get at soccer. Like I do feel like there is a difference. Like if you stop and eat an orange versus if you eat a Mars bar, you actually feel like you get some energy from said orange. But those Mars bars are still good.
That's awesome. Time has flown. We've had a blast having you on. Now, don't clock out yet. I'm going to give you a little bit of heads up. We still have the code of the week we need you to do. But in the meantime...
The code of the week?
The quote of the week.
Oh, quote. Okay.
Yeah, so a little sentence at the end of the episode. We like to drop it on everyone at the end. When Jesse and I used to do them, we'd always forget until the end of the episode, and you just say whatever comes to mind. We were not inspirational in ours whatsoever. But in the meantime, Jesse's going to let you know how to subscribe to us, and then we're going to pitch it back to Dave, and he can tell us where we can all find him as well. So,
okay.
So everything is linked below in the show notes. So any video we talked about, Dave's favorite baits, anything we talked about, I'm going to type out and put down below in the show notes. So you'll be able to just click on that and do that. If you want to ask questions for our next guest, make sure you become a Patreon member, even a free member, because that's where we post the Ask the Questions there. And you'll be able to interact with our guests as well as send us messages as well.
And Dave, Mr. Mercer, how can people, if they want to follow you, what would you like them to follow you on?
Preferably not on the road. But any other social media platform, it's either Facts of Fishing or Dave Mercer. It's kind of a variation of all of that. I wish I was better at my job and I'd have it all ironed out by now, but I don't. On Twitter, it's Dave Mercer, and other places it's at Facts of Fishing. But generally, if you put in either, you'll get us. I do a podcast called Mercer, which is awkward to promote because it's my name. We only called it that because we had a logo. But it's the Awkwardly Honest Fishing Podcast. I have different fishing pros on, and we ramble a lot like what we've done here, but with less structure. And we'd appreciate you tuning in. And thanks.
If
Please
you thought
watch.
This is a fun episode, Dave's are all like this pretty much. His are entertaining.
Yeah. And again, I'll link everything down below. So if you want to follow Dave and check out his podcast, everything will be linked below.
Awesome.
And now finally, as tradition states, we have the quote of the week. And to handle that for us today is Dave Mercer.
I'm a big quote guy, so I'm going to do two. Because my favorite quote that I've lived life by is, and Jesse, we've gone this far. Okay. I know you've had enough of me. I can tell. Okay.
Looks like you're trying to pay attention here, Jesse.
I can see it through your eyes. He's like, oh my gosh. But one of the greatest quotes, and it was a John Lennon quote, and it is, when I was 5 years old, my teacher asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up. I answered happy. My teacher said, you don't understand the project. And I responded, you don't understand life. And I have truly lived my life to that. What do you want to be? And that is happy. And I try to be that as often. And a way that I stay there and stay grounded, because for a number of years, I've been so lucky to do so many of the incredible things I get to do, but life comes at you quick. To steal a line from Ferris Bueller, it comes at you quick. And
so many quotes.
Sometimes, so many quotes. Sometimes you don't really absorb what's around you. And that's why I started, and I'll say it at every podcast, every time I sign off the stage at a Bassmaster event, I say, enjoy being, because that is a quote I also live by, because no matter where you are, 10 years from now, you're going to look back at this, wherever you are, whatever it is, even if it's your job, if it's whatever, as, man, those were some amazing times. So enjoy where you are and enjoy being. I mean, I think it was long, but I think I nailed it.